All right, thank you very much, Jerry. I'm Mike Hackert from NAVAIR. I'm actually dual-hatted at NAVAIR. I'm the S&T manager as well as the lead engineer for the development host. And what I'm going to talk to you about is open standards. And since I'm standing between you and lunch, I'm going to jump directly to the conclusion. And then we can get into more details if you'd like to. But all right, so you've heard a lot of talks already over the last 2 days. These standards are real, and there's an ecosystem being developed around them. And that's what's being applied in what I'll be talking about. There's acquisition dollars behind them as well. So that says that, okay, the industry is developing them, the standards are mature enough that we can go into acquisition. And then the third is we have a coordinated plan relative to a path forward to apply them and leverage the benefits from them. Now I wanted to start trying to answer the question from yesterday, is it real or isn't it real? And so one of the things I learned, I spent 20 years at Corning prior to coming to the Navy. And one of the things I got to see as a bright young engineer when I started out of college was how the company had decided they wanted to do a culture change. And so I listened and learned from an MBA Harvard grad CEO, and what I saw him do was realize there was a lot of problems in affecting a major cultural change in an organization like that. But there are three major things you have to do. First is you have to come up with a vision and a set of objectives and communicate that clearly and get the organization inspired to do that, to follow or to fulfill the vision. And so in my world, the vision or the goals and objectives are set at the Office of Secretary of Defense level, the OSD level. And what you have here is directly out of the Better Buying Power 3.0 that the OSD put together a few years ago. So, now, okay, so that sort of sets the major direction of where we're supposed to be going. Next, you have to get the middle layer of management involved and get them committed to this. And now I got to understand, usually if they've gotten there, they're pretty conservative, risk-averse. They don't want to do much in the way of change. And so it's very hard to get that to happen. And so good news is we have an agreement coming that's been made, that's been signed by the 3 service secretaries saying, yes, start using these open standards that we have developed and now have an ecosystem of hardware out there. Okay, so that's the second step. And then the third step in the process of a major change is to be able to get the low-level rank and file, which I sort of consider myself a part of, to get them engaged. Now, often, part of what I look for when I look for that level of organization to get involved in it, what I'm looking for is someone who's bright, young, entry-level manager or engineer who's full of energy and wants to effective change. And so if you look at the people involved, those are the people involved. And they're coming up with very creative and effective ways to work inside of this bureaucracy that looks sort of like the Dilbert zone to figure out how to do things that cause the change to happen. So now, okay, you've seen this before. The 3 standards that I'm involved in, I'm the lead engineer for host. It's hardware. It leverages and applies the hardware, or the Open VPX standard at this point in time. We have CMOSS, which is sort of a combination of standards that they've developed for their needs, as well as an architecture that assembles a number of standards, including the ones they've developed. And then you have this SOSA, which is sort of green growing and coming together as the place where we can all come together and develop an open architecture, applying standards that exist, and or creating where we need them because they don't exist. And so if you're going to talk about what's going on here, I know that host sort of looks like Open VPX, but I sort of would appreciate it if you mentioned me if you're talking to the Navy, because it's important for my managers to know that I actually am doing something for host and not SOSA. And so there's some uniqueness about this. It's not creating necessarily anything new. It's compiling existing standards and focusing and taking the standards that industry has already developed and limiting them down, very similar to what you heard yesterday about what SOSA is doing. If you look, looks sort of like SOSA, right? Well, so we have been working together in a synergistic fashion, so we're not duplicating our efforts, but building on each other's efforts. One of the things I wanted to point out in this slide, though, which, again, I've shown this before, is, okay, so everybody thinks host OpenVPX, because that's our current tier 2. But we also understand there are smaller form factors, and right now I've got a customer, that's sort of my job, is to go find customers and figure out how to satisfy their needs. They've got a small form factor, and I'm sorry, Jerry, but 3U is just too big for the environment or the box they're going in, so we got to find something smaller. And so we're doing a trade study, and we're going to come up with a second tier 2. And oh, by the way, so we're going to grow it and incubate it and develop it in host, and then we're going to come to SOSA and say, hey guys, what do you think about this? And can we start applying it or bringing it under the SOSA banner after we know what it isn't got a customer base lined up? And then the other thing is this registry, which is just a means for us to be able to share and exchange what components are out there and being applied by who. So now I want to talk a little bit about CMOSS. And like I said, CMOSS does a lot. It's quite impressive what their capabilities are. But again, part of the reason why I consider this effort to be successful, or why I'm glad to be part of it, is because when I got introduced to the CMOSS guys, they said, oh yeah, well, we've got to, okay, they'd checked in the box. They said they had their acquisition community tied into this, and they had their customers saying, yeah, we're ready. In 1 to 5 years, we're going to be ready to go on contract for a major acquisition of deploy hardware, and so we're developing in advance, and we're fulfilling their needs and aligning with that, so that when they're ready to go to acquisition, industry is in place. Thank you very much for all the people who've worked with us to help develop that system and the modules that go into it. So now it's ready for prime time when we go into full acquisition. And if you look, it has a number of different things, either ones that standards like that they've developed, such as Mora that they're applying, or Victory, which has been embellished and reused to satisfy their particular needs. SOSA, as I said earlier, is the overarching open standard being developed in the open group, which includes everything from a business group to work the business part of it, all the way down to the hardware, which is heavily leveraging what Host has been developing. And so now I wanted to jump to the aha moment from my perspective, or what got me excited, and it's been keeping me from being able to help participate. It's like, I'm sorry for the guys in the SOSA committee. I looked at what they said with active participation. It's like, I don't have time to actively participate in the standards anymore, because what I've been doing is trying to figure out how to satisfy the needs of the acquisition community that are applying Host. And so the 800-pound gorilla in the room is the JSF Tech Refresh 3, which now has Host it's in their spec from the JSF program office down to Lockheed, down to to Harris, who's going to be developing their modules. And the same thing is happening with the Mission Computer Alternative, and the Future Vertical Lift program is it's in an earlier stage, but they're getting written in as well. And so I see that my yellow highlighting got moved from where I had intended it. It's above the bullet that says open system architecture to enable flexibility to add, upgrade, and update future capabilities. But this is straight off of www.jsf.com, and I wanted to connect the dots between what it said in the press release and what they're really talking about, which is the Host standard base and the other open standards that you've been hearing about in the last day and a half. CMOSS's acquisition success, I don't want to get into all the details of who's doing what to whom, but connecting the dots between what's said on the slide and acquisition. So in my world, I don't have a magic wand, and I don't have the ability to say, write a contract for $1 billion to go acquire something. That isn't the way acquisition works. What I'm able to affect as a Dilbert engineer is I can go in and write and get everyone in the community to agree with me that, oh yes, you need in your acquisition documentation a specific requirement for this that fulfills that, which connects up to that OSD document that I showed as my first slide. Okay, so I can do that, and then if you look and all the 3- and 2-letter and 4-letter acronyms in here and go to the Defense Acquisition University and look up what those acronyms stand for, what you'll see is these are acquisition documents which give the direction or the set of requirements. For example, the CDD. If a requirement is in there, a program office has to go and they execute, and the machine starts cranking the handle on going acquiring against those particular sets of requirements. So again, if you look these up, you can find them. And hopefully I've given you enough to be able to, when you go home and look at this, you can connect the dots between actual acquisition and what the program requirements are. And so another really big program is this, actually I forgot what it, JBT, Joint Battle Command Platform. This is a relatively major announcement. These guys are big. They've got lots of platforms that they're involved with and lots of acquisition dollars. And one of the other comments I was going to make relative to part of this, the reason why I think this effort is successful is because we've understood up front that you're just we're not going to successfully be able to just walk out and set up a ACAT-1 multi-billion-dollar program to acquire against our open architectures. What we're going to do is to go a different route, and I think it's back on one of these. Oh, here it is on this slide here. You see this acronym here, OTA? What happened a couple years ago is the acquisition process changed so that now the development community can go into a development process which has small dollars, aka tens if not hundreds of millions of dollars attached to it, to create developmental prototypes on the order of 50 to 100, which now if you connect the dots back to an outfit like mine that I work for, some of our platforms only have 60 or 75 platforms to begin with, or aircraft. And so we could effectively outfit a whole platform with innovative prototypes. Very, very innovative way to change the acquisition paradigm from the, we're going to just send this huge amount of money to a prime contractor to we're now going to take control of our platforms. So if you can look at this at your leisure. One of the things I did want to stop on is this 125 different platforms. That's a lot of small programs that are going to add up into a lot of acquisition dollars, which is a lot of opportunity. And the fact that these guys have locked into CMOSS says that there are going to be a lot of happy vendors in this room. At least that's my expectation when those orders start to hit. And then this sort of gives you the flow of what I expect will be happening, or what the Army is expecting to happen as they go forward in time. And I was very surprised to hear that even that the Army has even been successful at getting international interest and involvement in acquiring against their CMOSS system. So my last set of slides then are just some roadmap slides that Dr. Lipkin wanted me to present. And one of the key takeaways from these slides is that we in this standards community are working and trying to partner with industry to be able to explain what it is that we want in the way of capabilities to be able to, and asking in return, okay, so which way is the technology going and how do we set the roadmaps so together, partnering, we're able to set up a roadmap that we can set our sights on for acquisition. And I was looking at this, and where's my friends from power supply company? Yeah, I know, this needs to be updated because according to this, our need for 12-volt dies about the time that the committee stands up to develop it. Okay, so hey, look, this is what I was able to get through publication approval. There's an update already in the queue to come out. So stand by and don't take too much issue with the details here. The more important thing is we are engaged with the community and setting roadmaps on how we want to proceed. And it's incredibly aggressive, some of the things or the objectives that SOSA is trying to go after. But on the one hand, yeah, it's aggressive and high risk, and we're going to make mistakes along the way. But how better to be able to make fast progress than to set aggressive goals? And even if you only get 50 or 75% of the way, you're a whole lot better off than if you only set the 10% goal that you possibly could have met, or you could meet with no risk at all. Roadmap for cooling technology. And again, these will all be uploaded, I believe, when afterwards, and after Jerry has a chance to get all the presentations uploaded. And then a little different view relative to the hardware and the networking capabilities that go along with it. And so, okay, host is real, CMOSS, And so we have acquisition dollars going across it, or going to apply it. And it has tri-service coordination. It's like, hey, look, I can tell you right now, part of the reason why I'm not able to make all the standards meetings that I'd like to be able to make is because I have to do things like a weekly or bi-weekly tri-service coordination meeting where the 3 services get together to figure out. And part of what I thought was really great when I presented similar slides to these at the old Crows conference back at the end of November was I'm sure that we communicated very loudly and clearly because you actually had the 3 guys from the 3 different services, and somebody would ask a question to the Army guy and the Navy guy would answer. Somebody would ask a question to the Air Force guy and the Army guy, and it was a nice chorus going on because we're trying to work as closely together as we can. And maybe one of the other points I wanted to leave as a takeaway is that all 3 services are focused on the end game. The end game being lowering the cost. And okay, so the initial cost day 1 may be still the same as what it would cost. But you got to remember, in my world, according to the stats that come from OSD, 90% of the cost comes after the time we acquire the technology. And if we can change that 90% by half or quarter, or even at 10%, these are big dollar numbers that we're able to do cost reduction. Second is faster development time. I was watching what the guys with the CMOSS program were doing, and when you have a chassis that you own the interfaces on it, you can start swapping modules in it much more quickly than the 10 or 20-year cycles it's taken in the past to be able to develop and acquire something. And the last is transitioning new capability faster for our fleet. And that's ultimately, okay, as the S&T manager, that's what I wake up in the morning to try to accomplish. And this is just a means to an end, the end being able to put that capability in the fleet's hands faster.